Edo, Yasas Cobelia, welcome to another edition of the No Choftes podcast. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your NOUNA. It's been a big week for us, a very big week for us, and it's going to get even bigger. I've got two very special guests with me, as you can see. I've got Jonathan Johnson, a French football expert, to talk about our latest signing, and also Scott Coyne from the Belgian Football Podcast to talk about our opponents, Gent. So without further ado, gentlemen, first of all, thank you for appearing on this podcast at such short notice. It's been a topsy-turvy week for us, and I can understand how busy you guys have been at this juncture, so I appreciate you guys jumping on.
It's nice to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jonathan, you right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. No, thanks a lot for the invitation. Likewise, like Scott, absolute pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's get this pod underway with the latest signing. Blimey, what do we know about this player, Jonathan Cassama, or Cassama? I think that's how you pronounce it. Because you've got
Moreto Cassama. You know, he's a very dynamic player, midfielder, sort of all action. Bit inconsistent with Hans, but on his day, a very capable performer. I think, to be honest, I didn't expect him to make such. I'm just trying to think of the way I should term this move. Like
step down, say it, it's fine.
Nothing like that. I mean, it's just very out of left field as a kind of destination. But then again, when you look at the makeup of the squad, it's got some. It's sort of a mismatch of different types of players. So no, I'm curious to see how he's going to do. The funny thing is, I really expected him to kick on last season. He had a very good start to the campaign. If you want to sort of go back and have a look at highlights of Hans, I think it was a 3-3 draw with Montpellier. That kind of, in essence, is everything that's good about Cassama and everything that you can get from him on his day. Scored a couple of great goals in that match. Has a really good shot on him from distance, but just was sort of in and out of the Haas team. When he performed, he didn't necessarily, sort of stand out in the same way that he did in that game against Montpellier, and I think that's why ultimately Haas opted to move on from him. It's a very young project as well, I would say, under Oscar Garcia. So it was. Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise not to see him push on, given the way that he performed in the beginning of last season.
Well, this move came left field for everyone, really, and it's been kind of like a tradition for us at the moment with our ownership. Most of the signings, if not all of them, this summer, no one expected. So, for this gentleman to sign for us, I think it's broken the club record deal as well. I believe it's 1.5 million euros, which for a small team like us, it's a huge deal. Now, we've got two central midfielders already who are very, very, very talented. We've got Ferd Bachirou, who joined from Nottingham Forest. He's probably been our best midfielder for the past 2-3 seasons. Even though he joined last summer, he's been exceptional. I think he's too good for the Cypriot League. But anyway, and we got Mix Diskerud, who had a spell in MLS and in Norway. He's done fairly okay. We've got a youngster called Hambos who scored in the first leg against Gent. So we've got a good group of players. But for this signing, it's huge for us. It's absolutely huge. What can you tell us about his ability, his traits? Is he a number 8? Would you say he's a box-to-box? What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's definitely more of a sort of defensive midfielder. I mean, he definitely has box-to-box capabilities. Like I said earlier, he has a good shot on him from range. He has a bit of tenacity about him. He's quite a well-rounded player. Comes from a league with pedigree as well, having spent his formative years in Portugal. In fact, played at youth level for Portugal, I believe, before switching to his native Guinea-Bissau. So he is a player of quality. But like I said, I think the biggest question mark over him, certainly enough to sort of bring us to the negotiating table for that kind of fee, was the sort of consistency issues. But then again, in a team like Haas, consistency sometimes can be a problem when you're dealing with so many youngsters. The other thing that I would observe about Haas in general is that they've done some very strange business this summer. Letting Rakovic go to Mallorca in Spain was a bizarre move. Letting Ekitike join PSG on loan, an initial loan deal with an option to buy, another strange decision. So, this is kind of in line with what's been, quite a strange summer for the club. And it could be that they've let go of a player, who will ultimately, come back to bite them.
Is he good on transition? Has he got a good pass on him as well? Because we are looking for a player that can play the ball into the channels, I believe, anyway.
I mean, I think he's definitely more suited to the technical game as opposed to the physical game. I mean, he can impose himself, but I wouldn't say that that's his strong suit. He does have a good eye for a pass, and he's got good vision as well, which allows him to identify those moments, to unleash his shot from range because he can see the opportunities forming. So, I mean, in a team, like this where, he's going to be playing sort of as part of an underdog outfit in a lot of their games, certainly in Europe. I think he could be suited to being part of, a team that could be a surprise package and cause issues for some outfits.
Brilliant. I've got a couple of quick questions here. One is from Mario, in fact, two of them from Mario. How bad was his injury and will it affect his overall play?
I mean, I don't think it's sort of, at that point where, it's going to have a truly detrimental impact on his career at his age, still sort of in his mid 20s. But, it does take players, quite a while to work their way back to fitness. Perhaps that factored into Haas thinking as well when they were negotiating the transfer. Ultimately, I do think he's a player who could probably recapture, his best form, and perhaps he needed that move away, that change of scenery. Because, like I said, the Haas project is very youth based, so there was a lot of competition for places. Some very exciting young talents coming through, and I think when you sort of lose a bit of your progression through an injury, it is hard to sort of make that ground back.
Lovely. And there's another question unrelated to this player. It's a player called Khalifa Koulibaly, who I believe was at Auxerre or Nantes, if I'm not mistaken. Apparently he's close to joining Omonoia as well. Do you know much about him?
Yeah, Koulibaly is, if I remember correctly, sort of more of a target man. I think he was playing for Nantes most recently. Definitely somebody who, can be an aerial threat, likes the ball at his feet. I wouldn't necessarily call him prolific, but I think he's somebody who could definitely, he's definitely capable of being a handful on his day. I've seen him, be a bit of a menace to PSG's defense at times a couple of seasons ago. So he's somebody who I think could bring a bit of quality for sure.
Scott, you might know a bit about Koulibaly. He was at Gent for a couple of seasons, wasn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was. That's right. Yeah, yep. Yep, decent player, I think, big, physical, as John was saying, certainly can fulfill that kind of target man role. He's obviously playing kind of a higher level now. I think he'd be an interesting addition, you know what I mean? Certainly if you could bring him in, because he would add an element that certainly if European football is to progress for you, which at the moment it looks like it's going to, then you could definitely add something to the mix for you.
Brilliant. Jonathan, one more question before I let you go about our new signing. In terms of the best system that you reckon that he can play in, do you think a 4-2-3-1 is better suited to him? Was he more like a 4-3-3?
I think that's a good question. I think he's quite versatile. Like I said, he's got a good footballing education. So, also coming to Ligue 1, one of the things that really gets drilled into a lot of players is sort of tactical versatility, understanding different systems. It's all quite thorough, which is why quite often when you see a player leaving France and going to a foreign league, that sort of tactical aspect of their game will stand out. So I don't think that he'll necessarily struggle in any, sort of particular systems. I just think as long as he's cast sort of in the right mold, given his qualities, his ability to be that kind of box to box figure, but not necessarily to be wedded to like the defensive tasks and to be allowed, to sort of get into positions to shoot from time to time, I certainly think that he'll turn out to be an asset.
Brilliant. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, so again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and maybe you can keep an eye out on our team and see how this lad's doing.
I will do now we've had a chat about him. But no, thanks a lot for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you guys, and best of luck for both of you for the respective seasons. Big fan of Belgian football from years ago when I used to commentate the matches over here in France. So I do still keep an eye on what's going on in Belgium, less so in Cyprus, unfortunately. But now, I've been chatting about Cassama. I will keep an eye out for him in your European forays. Fingers crossed for you they continue. But fingers crossed as well that there's some good Belgian performances on the continent this season.
Brilliant. Cheers, mate. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
Take care, mate. Ta-ra. See ya. Well, guys, that was Jonathan Johnson. Give him a follow. He's got a Twitter handle, John_Legossip. In fact, I've put it in the show description. So if you want to give him a follow and send him some of your kindest regards and kind words. So, Scott, your turn now, mate. You're front and center. I'm going to get a bit more relaxed about this one. So, obviously, tomorrow, Omonoia versus Gent, second leg of the Europa League qualifier. As we discussed before going live, I didn't give us a snowball's chance in hell of getting a result. I thought we were going to get absolutely hammered 2-3, 4-0. But we came to Belgium and we got a victory, which surprised us. I'm sure it surprised a lot of people in Belgium, right?
Yeah, I mean, you were the only one surprised. I think, there was I think the first thing that's worth pointing out here is, I think, Belgian football fans generally, regardless of who their team is, are kind of they're quite self-effacing and very modest. So while there was an expectation that they were heavy favourites going into this tie, I think the disappointment from the first leg result isn't quite as deep in Belgium as perhaps it is, for those who follow Belgian football outside. I think that sort of result is always a result that kind of Gent have in them. I think the disappointment comes more from the fact that they actually played quite well, I think, last week, created quite a lot, hit the woodwork, just couldn't quite put the ball in the net for some reason. And, football's funny sometimes like that. You get games where, you play quite well and actually, you get hit with some sucker punches. And in a way that's kind of what happened last week. I think, it was very clear what they have to do now. They have to come into the game, the second leg, and really go for it, and be really open. And in some respects, this kind of suits Gent because of the way that they set up. They do like to try and play on the front foot. So it's not really going to fundamentally change their approach, other than maybe add just a little bit of extra impetus and urgency to the game. There'll be no let's knock the ball around and hold on to it for, the opening 20 minutes and feel this game out. They have to really, set the tempo of this game from the off if they're going to turn it around, because it's a reasonably big ask still, I think, for them now, I would say.
We have been prone to losing leads in Europe, as we saw last season against Antwerp. We went away from home and I think stamina and energy kind of went against us. A lot of our players were dead on their knees after the first hour, and Antwerp completely dominated. I mean, they were dominating from the off, to be fair. But the thing that surprised me most about Gent in the first leg was how laborious they were first half. It's almost as if they were stuck in first gear. And the moment that second half began, they were on the front foot. They were playing 10 yards further forward. They got a number 10, I forget his name, but he was always in the thick of things, kind of in between the centre forward, between the central midfielders, really, pulling the strings. But as you mentioned, they had a couple of opportunities. There was a header that hit the post. Our goalkeeper, Fabi, made 2 fantastic saves, one from close range, and I think he might be out tomorrow, which is a big loss for us because last season he won us the cup. The year before, he practically won us the title. He was our best player. In fact, he was the best player in Cyprus 2 seasons ago. He was voted. So him being out was a big loss. But I think first half we did very well to nullify Gent. And, I could say that Gent were very, very bad first half, but I'll be taking it away from our performance first half as well. But I don't expect Ghent to be anything as bad as what they were in the first leg.
Well, it's interesting, the scenario they're coming in, kind of 2 goals down, because, you know, what you're touching on something in there that's quite characteristic of Ghent, and that is they're quite slow starters in a lot of games. They tend to feel their way into most matches. It's not unusual, you know, for them to start quite slowly. And the interesting thing here is I don't think they're going to be able to afford to do this in the second leg. This is something kind of they can't really do. They need to kind of, you know, as I was saying, kind of set the tempo and I think play quite aggressively from the off. So that characteristic that is just in them as a side, certainly under Van Heisenbroek anyway, as head coach, really needs to be left on the bench. I think for the second leg, because they're absolutely not going to be able to do that. I think they are a side who tend to, sometimes they need to score first or to get an equaliser before they really ratchet it up, and that's just something in the personality of this side. I would be surprised if they were to start slowly in the second leg, because, you know, they absolutely kind of can't afford to, but it is something that, you know, they do tend to do. So, you know, what you saw last week was not actually unusual, and sometimes they have a tendency, you know what I mean, they struggle to up the ante. I think sometimes when needed, they need a goal, which is a kind of odd. It's an odd way of playing football sometimes. You know what I mean? They can have a lot of possession. They can be creating quite a lot, but, you know, it's still not going for them. They almost need a goal to get in as a you know, boot up the backside to them. And if being two goals down isn't enough for them to start at a certain tempo, then I would fear for them in the second leg. No fresh injury worries at all. So they're coming into it with kind of quite a strong side. And actually, the weird thing is they've been playing quite well since the start of the season. You know, 5 games in now in Belgium, 2 wins, 2 draws. Probably should have more than that. Their game at the weekend was obviously postponed to allow them to prepare for this game, and they'll be hoping that, you know, obviously that little rest period will stand them in good stead. We'll just need to wait and see.
Scott, there's this I wouldn't say it's a defeatist attitude in Cyprus, but it's like, you know, we've seen this happen before with us. As I mentioned, Antwerp, it's happened various occasions in the past, especially when we've had bad refereeing decisions go against us, which this happens in football. But in terms of the attitude from the Ghent supporters, the Belgian press, how have they seen Omonoia now after that performance in the first leg? Because I spoke to Stefan, who's a Belgian journalist, and he said to me the club underestimated Omonoia. Did the perception change afterwards?
I don't think the perception changed, but I would certainly agree with Stefan, who we know quite well at the Belgian Football Podcast. He's been a guest on our show in the past as well. You know, knows Ghent very well. I would absolutely agree with him that I think they did underrate Omonoia. I think there was a sense that this was a very good draw for Ghent. And that's still the general feeling, you know, despite the way the tie sits going into the second leg. I think there is a tendency sometimes with Belgian teams generally for them to underperform when they're expected to do well, and vice versa. I think that would be fair to say. I think the disappointment from last week will have to be carried into the second leg, I think, and used as motivation, to be honest. I think that's the best way of approaching this game. You know, a feeling that they should have got a little bit more out of the game than they did. But what it underlines is something that's been a trend for a long time now. And it is a bit of a cliche to say this, but it's true that there aren't really any easy games at these levels anymore. You know, there was a point that Vincent Company made not that long ago when he was still at Anderlecht before he went to Burnley, when he was talking about their Anderlecht's failure to qualify for Europe, kind of this time last year when they lost narrowly to Vitesse Arnhem, and he said, look, you have to accept and understand that teams coming from countries that would be considered smaller, and smaller teams are much closer to sides that would be considered much bigger. Now that gap is much narrower than it used to be, I think, and a lot of this is to do with data and stats and how that's used, and how you can really get quite significant margins and bridge what would normally be quite big gaps competitively, if you use that smartly and creatively. And I think a lot of sides that are considered smaller from smaller leagues are doing that really, really well now. So I think it's only probably football fans in certain environments who really genuinely underrate sides kind of now. I think you have to go into these ties, with the same mentality that you would if you were playing, a big elite side, to be honest, because if you don't, then, you're going to have an off day. And supposedly smaller teams, and it's certainly not the way I look at it, always come into ties like this heavily motivated, understandably. I think from Gent's perspective, what's interesting is they know that regardless of the outcome, they will be playing some form of group stage football. Last season, they did reasonably well in the Conference League, and should they not be able to turn this tie around, then that will obviously happen again. I think from Gent's perspective specifically, what's important is there's a project going on there at the moment where there were slow starters last season, built over the course of the season, quite a tempo up, finished very strongly, and I think it's quite important for them to try and turn this tie around, just to be able to show that there's tangible signs of progress there. Playing in European group stage football at any level, obviously consistently, is the most important thing. But I think being able to say that they've managed to qualify for the Europa League group stages is that little bit more important, because then they can argue, okay, there's some tangible progress here, which helps the profile of the club. And obviously the income generation is slightly bigger in that tournament as well. So it wouldn't be a disaster to go out at this stage, but I think you could probably use the word embarrassing with a small e, should it go that way.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, mate, because for us it's, we're 2-0 up, and at the same time we're thinking it would be great to go through, but there's still that element of doubt with a lot of our supporters. Don't get me wrong, many think that we can still go on to progress into the next stage, and why wouldn't you assume that, being 2 goals up? But again, this is football, and all it takes is one refereeing decision. There's no VAR. All it takes is one defensive mistake or a goalkeeping howler. As we saw last night with Djurgården, they played our rivals, and they were 2-0 down at half-time, and they conceded a goal from a free kick, which the goalkeeper was completely wrong-footed, and it completely changed the complexion of the tie. The Upwell were 2-0 down from the first leg. 3-0 down from the first leg. They're 2-0 up at half time, and you're thinking, oh, hang about, they might get something here. And fortunately for us, they didn't go through because I can't have them in Europe this season, mate. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm not one of these people that believes that Cypriot teams need to do well. I don't give a shit. No disrespect to anyone that believes the same thing, but it's only my team. I don't care about anyone else. But anyway, so yeah, all it takes is one mistake or one, refereeing decision that could change everything. So listen, we're expecting Gent to come at us. We're expecting a similar performance from the first leg from a defensive standpoint. And to be fair, I think when you've got a head coach like Neil Lennon that has, I wouldn't say has been there and done it, but he knows what it takes to succeed at this stage of European competition, I think that helps us a lot. It's not as if we've got a head coach that hasn't managed in Europe or doesn't have much experience, in a second leg with a lead like that. He went to Lazio and won. With Celtic, he beat Barcelona at home. So he's got a good track record. I'm guessing that bodes well for us anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a really interesting point there. And my feeling about the second leg is that I think the outcome of it depends almost more on how Omonoia approach this tactically than what Gent do. Gent know what they need to do, and there being no away goals in a way makes it even simpler. I think scoring 3 or 4 is a big ask without Omonoia scoring. That's generally how I feel about this tie. It has the feeling of a game in which, again, Gent could and realistically will probably play kind of quite well. But I think one more Omonoia goal, I think, will be enough to kill this tie. I think whether they want to sit in and try and hit Gent on the break or not, I suppose is the biggest question for me, because Gent are certainly going to see the vast majority of the ball. I think the transition play from both sides is going to be probably key here. I think again, I think it's important they don't panic. Although setting the tempo is the most important thing, it's not the end of the world if they don't score an early goal. I think it's just important that a goal does come. That will then introduce obviously some nerves and change the complexion of the game as well. And then knowing that, if it needs to go to extra time, necessarily to turn the tie around, and that's the way it has to be. I think they would rather it didn't, I think, from their own perspective, because they have a couple of games coming up domestically in quite a short time now, because obviously last weekend's game was postponed. So I think their preference, quite obviously, would be to try and turn this game around within the 90 minutes. But you have to be pragmatic about it and recognise that that's not always possible. So it's going to be interesting, I think, the first 20 minutes in particular.
I think the weather might have a bit of an effect. I think it might be about 24, 25 degrees by the time the game kicks off. Apparently, it might rain even tomorrow in Nicosia, which I don't know how true that is, but raining in Nicosia is like, wow, does that ever happen? I'm joking. But so I think the humidity will have a little bit of an effect. That being said, the way that football's gone these days, I'm pretty sure footballers are used to it by now. I wouldn't say that it's second nature, but I don't think it plays as much of a role as it used to, because I guess there's the sports science element, the diets, and there's obviously the breaks as well now, the water breaks. So I don't think it's going to play a huge effect. But I'll tell you what, though, I think there's going to be 15 to 18,000 supporters there, which is going to be huge for us. And if they're going to be in fine voice, I think the atmosphere could be a bit tasty.
Yeah, I mean, you would certainly hope so. I mean, from a temperature point of view, temperatures in Belgium have been pretty warm recently, actually. There's been a lot of games played around the 30-degree mark and some above that, actually. So it's been, I would say, above average temperature-wise in Belgium recently. So, if there were any concerns around that, then probably they would be dispelled, because they've been pretty acclimatized to playing at temperatures even warmer than that, rather bizarrely. Bizarre thing to come on and say it's probably been warmer in Belgium than it has in Cyprus recently. So that's quite amusing. But it's always important to have a good atmosphere at games. And I think that should be used as motivation by Gent as well, obviously, kind of being the visitors. And yeah, hopefully there is a raucous crowd at the game.
There's been a comment here. My congrats to Loizu's father that he destroyed his son's career. I'm not going to talk about Loizu's dad, because I've got nothing against the guy, and he's a father and he cares about his son. But this is a player that is very highly rated, Scott, by us and most of Cyprus, in all fairness. He's 19 years old. He's the one that scored a brace against Antwerp last season. And last summer, there was interest from a Belgian club. I'm not sure if it was Brugge. I'm not 100% sure about that. But there has been an interest from another club in the Netherlands, apparently. And the player has since decided that he doesn't want to play. His dad had a dispute with the club about the player's contract, about his future. So much has happened. We don't know the full facts. So anything I'm telling you now is just based on reports and rumors, and it's just conjecture. But what I will say, just briefly, boys and girls that are watching, one of the publications recently said that it was Camber in the Netherlands that wanted Loizu. I could tell you this for a fact. The sporting director has never even heard of the player. And I've heard this from someone that knows him very well. And I found that out today. So just to clarify, whichever website it was, I'm not even going to name them. I've got them here. I'm not even going to name them. But it's not them because they don't even know who he is. Anyway, so Scott, do you know much about Loizu? Is this player a name that's been on someone's tongue in Belgium, or is it just another? Because we've got a few Cypriot players in Cyprus at the moment. We've got Gadelari out there. We've got Laifi as well, who I think is at Standard Liège. So a few Cypriot players have gone to Belgium.
Yep, that's right. I think he's. I'm not sure how concrete the interest actually is. I think he's a player who falls into that category of being somewhere on a lot of clubs' lists. As somebody that they're looking at. I don't think there was a great deal of kind of concrete interest, but yeah, I mean there is some Cypriot representation just now. You know, Lifus is at Standard and been playing quite regularly there for a while. It's been having a bit of a tough time actually. During that whole period, Standard are actually in the middle of a kind of rebuilding process actually, so there's a lot of change and a degree of chaos at the moment inside that club. But yeah, from a Cypriot national point of view, there's kind of good representation there. I think if he was to get a move to Belgium, I think it would be very good for him. You know, it's an excellent place to develop, obviously, for young players because they know they're going to be guaranteed game time because of the way that football works in Belgium. You know, the academy system is very strong here in Belgium, and it has to be because the model of virtually all the clubs is to develop young talent and, you know, sell them for top fees. That's you know, the nature of where they are in the food chain. But it is definitely one of the leagues in Europe where you'll be guaranteed regular playing time if you get that move, and if you do well, then you know there's a good opportunity to move to what would be considered one of the top 5 leagues, and it's a well-known, long-standing entry point for players from Africa and Asia and more from South America now as well. So yeah, it's entirely understandable that I think both he and his family would be looking at that as a potential kind of, you know, next destination.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a few more questions here, Scott. Bezos, a player that's recently joined. Where's it gone now? It's disappeared now. I had it. I'll bring that up. Here we go. Is he a top player?
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot. I think there was some disappointment in some Ghent quarters that they weren't able to agree a contract extension for him. The club did want to do that. I think it was one of those situations where, because of his age, I think Roman was looking for a 2-year deal or more, but I think the club were only prepared to offer him one. Which wasn't to his liking. And then obviously when you add into the mix the situation in Ukraine at the moment, I think that added a degree of uncertainty as to whether he wanted to stay in Belgium. He'd fallen out of favour slightly and had been a little bit unlucky, to be honest. An experienced player, very reliable, flexible too, you know, can also play as a second striker, actually. Not something he did terribly often, but funnily enough, he started last year's Belgian Cup final unexpectedly when there was an injury in the warm-up to Laurent Depoitre, who was going to start the game, I think, and Bezos started in his place and did very well on the day and almost scored a couple, hit the post a couple of times. But yeah, he's a very calm, reliable player, good physically, has a bit of pace about him, creativity, and a fantastic pickup actually for Omonoia. A bit of a surprise to us in Belgium, because there was interest by quite a number of clubs in him, and I think a lot of people were quite surprised when Omonoia was announced as his destination, because I think there was an acceptance that there was a high probability that he was going to go back to Ukraine, but that's not what happened in the end.
There's another question here, which is, I think you touched on earlier, but in terms of Ghent's season, would it be a disaster if they don't get into the Europa League?
I don't think so. I mean, I think knowing that they're guaranteed group stage football, even if it is the Conference League again, I think is not the end of the world for them. I think the most important thing, as I was saying a little bit earlier, is just to be playing group stage European football consistently. It's really important for the profile of the club on the general state international stage, and also for attracting players. I think the disappointment would come obviously in that, there would be a slight difference in budgetary terms. I don't think it's going to affect what they will do with the remainder of the transfer window over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think they're going to change their activity based on that at all. I think it would just be a disappointment in terms of, as I was saying earlier as well, about being able to argue that they were making some really tangible progress longer term in playing in the Europa League rather than the Conference League. And actually, I have to say the Conference League's been brilliant so far. It's arguably been by far the most interesting of the 3 European tournaments, as we expected it to be. And there is also an argument that says that Ghent probably have a better chance of getting out of the group, should it be the Conference League, and really having a really good run quite far into that tournament, hopefully along with some other Belgian sides, should they see the results out this week. So I don't think it's going to affect anything in budgetary terms or in terms of the long-term picture. I think it's just important for the club's profile, maybe, to be in the Europa League. So I think they feel kind of quite pragmatic about it, and I think the fans are probably quite relaxed about that. They go into it with a sense more of hope rather than expectation now.
I've got 2 more questions that are quite interesting, actually. There's this one. If Omonoia play the same system and tactics like last time, how well can Ghent respond now that they've faced it?
Well, I don't think Ghent are going to change fundamentally the way they play, despite the circumstances. I mean, I would expect more or less the same lineup as last week. The only question for me is, will Castro Montes start on the right, or will Van Huizenbroek start Matisse Samoise, who has been very good? I think Castro Montes will probably start. That's my feeling about it, but I don't expect a change in system because of the way they're coming into this game, because I think the side that played last week, looking at it, I've got it in front of me here actually, is arguably the strongest. The other question mark maybe is Sven Coombs, who started in midfield last week. I don't know whether Van Huizenbroek will want to start Varis Adija, the club captain, instead, who doesn't often play 90 minutes anymore because of his age, but in influence terms, he's quite a big player for Ghent, and I think physically he can be quite dominating in games, so he could be useful depending on the way the second leg goes. But I think the starting lineup will be exactly the same. I don't expect much to change at all, because the way that they played last week was exactly the same. I think he'll come into this game, Van Huizenbroek, kind of trusting his players and trusting his system, and perhaps just hoping that those things that went against them last week. And really, I mean, it was that thing that you can never quite control, and it's the luck factor, really. I think things went against them last week in a way that they just do sometimes in games, and I think they're probably hoping that the boot will be on the other foot in the second leg.
Well, I've got one more question, and we cannot talk about Omonoia and Belgian football without bringing up this utter clown. Not immediately, obviously. How did the Belgian press see the transfer of Zé?
Well, this has been an ongoing saga for kind of quite a while. I mean, I'm sure all the Omonoia fans will know quite a lot about Didier Lamkelzee now. He has been, and clown is not an unfair word to kind of describe him. I mean, he's always.
We've used worse. Worse.
I'm sure you have. And the interesting thing about him is he's nothing if not unpredictable. I think the thing I would say about him, I mean, this is a player who does have some natural footballing talent. the unfortunate thing is he doesn't always bring his talent, and that's the infuriating thing. You know, I think he should do his talking on the pitch, and I think he's pretty colourful, pretty eccentric, and I think he tends to rub people up the wrong way. He's the sort of person that falls out with people too quickly, and I think Antwerp, I think, will be glad to see the back of him. In all honesty, I think, you know, he was on a number of loans before signing for Kertrijk yesterday. That finally got over the line in a 3-year deal. Looked like he might even have been coming back to Omonoia. You know, he did turn up at the team hotel last week.
That for me was, I personally think he forgot his brain at the hotel in Cyprus, and they took it to Belgium for the first leg, and he just met them to pick it up. That's the only reason I could think why he met up, because he's just, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, he's quite a character, and I was talking to some people over the last couple of days about this, and I think this is a very brave signing of Kortrijk's on their part. You know, on another side in the top flight here in Belgium, they've made this signing, I think, for a number of reasons. One, because they've had a difficult start to the season. Things aren't going great for them, and you know what I mean, they need some extra colour and firepower in the squad, which when he's playing well, I think he could add, but you're taking a risk in bringing a personality like that into a camp, and he's a complete loose cannon. That's the only way I can kind of describe him. I think if he can find a coach who gets on well with him and they click together, then I think he could have a great time. But he has a history of either not performing on the pitch and falling out of favour, or of falling out with people and not even getting on the pitch. So it'll be interesting to see. He's got a lot to prove with this move. So it'll be interesting to see if he can, you know, bring the best of him, shall we say.
Lovely. So before we wrap it up, Scott, we've got to end it on a good note, because I can't end it with talking about that guy. Honestly, I can't. So what is your prediction for tomorrow, mate? You can be as fair as you want. You don't have to be nice for us.
I can see Gent winning the game but losing the tie overall, and I have a feeling that's the way it's going to go. I think they are going to concede. They've not been quite as good defensively I think they've not been quite as good defensively as they were last season, and they were very strong. They were one of the top sides defensively. And because the season's still kind of quite early, I can see them, this has got, you know, that old story of played pretty well, but, you know, just fell a little bit short written all over it for me. And I'm a bit nervous about the whole approach now. And that thing I was saying earlier on about them being slow starters in games, I think as well, that makes me nervous too. So I can see Gent falling just slightly short, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll take that. We will take that. We'll be biting our nails. Because mind you, we're used to it by now, Scott. You know, the semi-final of the cup, second leg, we had 10 men after 10 minutes, and we had backs against the wall when we got through, and then the final, we were down to 10 men after 5 minutes and ended up winning on penalties. So we're used to it. We're used to it by now. I just don't want to lose any more hair, man. I'm growing some of it back, but it's falling out, man. This team is killing me. But anyway, look, Scott, it's been great having you on. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you back on the next time Omonoia face a Belgian club. Might happen in the Europa League. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a delight. Great to chat to you, Stel, yeah.
Likewise. Have you got a Twitter handle or a Instagram, anything like that you like to promote or mention, or even the podcast? Yeah. I've put it in the show synopsis, or the section where you put all your information there, but it's all there. But please tell our listeners. Yeah, sure. I'm part of the 3-man team behind the Belgian Football Podcast. So we've got a weekly show that covers all the latest news across all of Belgian football, and we throw in extra specials throughout the season as well with guests from inside clubs. You can find us on Twitter at Podcast.
You can find me personally at Scott_Coin, or you can find my Belgian consultancy at Coin Consultant as well. So if you're looking for Belgian football news in English, then we're probably the best place to come.
It is, trust me. I listened to that pod. It's absolutely fantastic. And had it not been for your pod, I wouldn't know as much as I do about Gent, even though I did forget some players' names. But I did my research before the first game, which is why I was a little bit petrified when we played Gent. But hey, we got the win, which surprised most, and it was a well-deserved one if I'm being fair. But listen, second leg, anything can happen. We're very nervous. We're excited at the same time. We're guaranteed European football anyway, either Europa League or Conference League. So, yeah, roll on tomorrow night, which we're going to do a live straight after the game. We've got a special guest to do the match review. I haven't even told the boys. So they're going to jump on and they're going to see this guy. And be like, okay. It's not Matt, boys and girls. I spoke to Matt. He's back in the UK, but it's not Matt. But Matt will come on, I guarantee you. So until next time, boys and girls, bye.